And we are live.
Oh, ciao a tutti, welcome everybody. This is our first English-speaking event from GDG Venezia. Questo è il primo evento del GDG Venezia in cui parleremo in inglese, quindi insomma, se siete abituati a seguirci e sentite che parliamo in inglese è perché facciamo questo esperimento. So we're experimenting switching to English for this event because we had some requests to make a more wider event, to a more wider audience. So we will try. So I am Andrea. Here are with me Marco and Omar from GDG Venezia, and Carlo. Hi, Carlo.
Hello.
That this evening he will talk about Flutter and layouts. But who is Carlo? Carlo is a Flutter developer and an Android developer. He works for 3Rain. Is it?
3Rain, exactly.
Okay. Okay. And he is a guru developer. He's also the admin of Flutter Developers Italy. And he's well known in the community of developers in Italy. So, Carlo, I won't steal you much time. So please feel free to introduce yourself if you want to say something more, and then we can start with your talk.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you for inviting me in this event, because I always like to share what I know about Flutter. And I'm also excited to know that I'm basically beta testing this new format, since you usually did in Italian and then we switched to English. In fact, we were speaking before the start in Italian, and I almost forgot that I had to do the talk in English. But that's okay. It's not a problem. I will do without any issue. The slides are already in English, I think. I hope. So, yes, I will speak about Flutter and layout. More than Flutter layout, I want to compare Android layout with Flutter layout. So, this is what I understood from my experience in Android, because, as you said, I was an Android developer before becoming a Flutter developer. And the most struggling things about the changing from Android to Flutter is understanding the difference. The most different part is layout. Let's see what it is the most difficult thing when you check about layout in Flutter versus Android. So, first of all, who I am. As Andrea said, I'm Carlo. I'm a senior Flutter developer at 3Rain, where we develop our product in Flutter, especially in Flutter for web. And this is a funny thing, because I was an Android developer and I was hired to do web. Why? Because Flutter let you do this kind of things. And I'm the lead of Flutter Italia developers, one of the biggest community in Italy about Flutter. We have a Telegram group. You can reach me to Telegram if you want to join, or you can wait at the end of the talk, where on the thank you slide, you will see the link for the community. Let's start. What we are talking about today? We are talking about the main difference between the two systems. As I said, there are many things that can be understood more easily as something that is less immediate to grasp. So we will start from the basic. We will see what we have available to work on. Then we will switch to the main difference about the two design system. And I will do a quick overview about how to construct a layout, a simple screen in the two systems. And then we will talk about the alternative, because You can't find the linear layout in Flutter, but of course you have some alternative to use. So someone's told me, once you get used to Flutter widget, you start to want the widget when you're using Android Layout Builder. And this is was said by a great person. That was me. So let's see the basics. How we construct the layout in Flutter and Android. First of all, Android. Android use XML files to have a separate file for layout and classes. When we open our layout, we see an XML with all the reference of our UI. Then we have a layout builder. This is a typical example of a layout XML in Android. For example, to do this row that we are looking at in the left, we are using the layout file that you see on the right. Basically, in order to construct this, we will have a simple linear layout, horizontal. Then inside we have an image view as a first item. And then we have another linear layout that pick out the remaining space and two text view, one for the name and one for the city. To help us, Android offer us a layout builder. It's a simple way to construct layout because we have a graphic interface that we can use to move around items, and we can define all the property of those layout, view group, view, and we can mix and match and see immediately what we have as a result. But the tricky part in Android is that since the layout and the logic are separated, we need to bind it. This causes a lot of code that we need to write because, for example, in the previous example, if you want to refer the image view, you have to give an ID, then you have to go into the class file, can be the Java file or the Kotlin file. Then you have to look out for the image view by passing a context, calling the image view that you want to find by ID, and then you can interact with it. We have some kind of libraries that can help us to bind the item. For example, there is a data binding library where you can say directly in the XML which model should use, and then you can pass your model reference to the layout by code. But this is always separated, and you need to go back and forth between the two files to see what you can do. What's the difference in Flutter? Flutter is a different system that is called widget. The widget uses the same file written in Dart to show the layout, to build the layout, and to pass the data. For example, the same row that we have seen in the previous sample is basically constructed by a widget. This is a widget that I called row widget. In the row widget, I passed an index as a parameter. You can see that in the constructor, just to change the name and the subname. And then I used a widget called liststyle. The liststyle is a widget that you can find already in Flutter that basically give you a basic kind of row. Of course, you can construct whatever you want, but this is the best way to construct a simple row. You can have a leading, you can have a training. I didn't use that in this case. You can put an object there, you can have a subtitle or a title, and you basically construct your widget that way. This widget can be reused by basically passing a model. So in the same file we define it, the behavior and the UI. The only drawback for this is that we have to compose our files. It means that you don't have a layout builder that you can see immediately. But this is not really an issue because since we use hot reload, each time you change something in your UI, you can see directly the change in your emulator, in your phone, even in more than one at the same time. During the Flutter Engage the last year, I think, it was a Flutter Interact last year, they show up an octopus, they called it. Basically, it was a laptop with 8 different devices, a Chromebook, an iPhone, an iPad, and some Android phone. And basically, by running and changing the code, the UI was changing in all of the devices at the same time. So you have to compose your widget. What do you mean to compose? Basically, it's like playing with Lego, because if you want to do a situation similar to what we have seen on Android, we can do that. We can do directly in the same way, but instead of using a widget already created by the Flutter team, but we need to play Lego. Basically, we seen on the in the first row that we had, let's see the image. Sorry, I go back. We basically, if I want to do this row exactly like that with a Flutter widget composing, I have to use a row, then an image, then a column inside the same row, and 2 text. But the result is the same. So there is, to be honest, some type of external tool that you can use to build your layout. For example, Adobe XD give you the opportunity to export the layout as widgets. As you can see in the left part, just below the preview, there is the include in export all widget. So this can help speed up the process, but it's an external part. It's not included in Android Studio or in IntelliJ, so or in VS Code. So you don't find the layout builder as a native tools, but you may have some alternatives. So let's see what are the main difference in well designed for Android and for Flutter. In Android, we use different kind of dimensions for what we need to do. Basically, we have the DP, that are density independent pixel. They scale based on the pixel density of your device. This way, you know that in a smaller phone and in a bigger phone, you always will see a similar result, because the same image, let's say 100 dp, will cover almost 1/3 of a 320 pixel independency pixel device. And then we have the SP for the text and the pixel. The difference is the pixel will be always fixed, so you will see a big difference between dimensioning pixel in a smaller phone and in a bigger phone. And speaking about text, the SP are basically the same thing of the DP, but they are subject to the user preference, because the user can increase or reduce the size of the font, and this will be reflected on your phone. Then we have the constraint layout, that is the most used way to construct a layout. Basically, is something that you can use is a view group, and this view group will let you position the items inside the constraint layout by defining the constraint. You may say, I want this image on the left on that, I want this button on the bottom right of the constraint. And we have some fixed design. Is easy to follow standard in Android because basically material design was shipped by Google. So most of the the layout component are already done for ready for be used in that context. Most of the layouts are also material ready. So if you use a material team, you basically have a little effort to stick to the material design. Then we have the alignment of the items that are usually defined by XML tag. Mostly, the most used one is the gravity. For example, when you have a frame layout, you can use the layout gravity in inner item to decide where to move that. And then the spacing, because most of the item can have the parameters for padding or margin, so you can define the spacing in that way. In Flutter, it's somewhat similar, somewhat different. For the dimension, we have the device-independent pixel. We don't use anything else. Every dimension you define using a simple double. So I say this button should be 20. 20 is device-independent pixel. I don't have to specify any kind of measure unit because it's only one used. And this way, you can have a coherent result across all the device. It can be iOS, it can be Android, doesn't matter, because the device-independent pixel are the best choice to use the dimension in when you have a lot of different screen to take in account. Then to construct the layout in Flutter, as I say, we should compose. We have basically the widget can be container or content. There is no really a difference like the view group where we have view group and view, where the view group contains view or other view group and not. Each widget can accept another widget. Of course, there are some widgets that, example, the text doesn't have the child parameters to add another widget, but it's most because who wrote the text didn't find the necessity to add it. But basically, almost all the widget can be container. In Flutter, also, we are more free to design what we want. The layout can be basically changed by pixel, and this gives us a great degree of customizable because when you want to do something different, for example, a widget that should be more like iOS style, you can do that with easy, and you don't have the issue we find in Android where you have a less free environment for moving your layout. Widgets for Flutter are also material native. It means that even if Android should be the most updated one, Flutter widgets are born after the material paradigm is born. This means that all the widgets you see are 100% guaranteed that it will give you a material feeling when you use that. There is also another thing, because you can use the Cupertino theme instead of the material if you want to have a more iOS style look and feel. The alignment in Flutter is managed by widget, because in Flutter everything is a widget. If you want to center your text inside another layout, you should a widget that is called center. Basically, you have your layout, can be a column, a row. You put a center inside, and inside the center, you put your text. You will have this kind of nested structure that is not bothering at all Flutter because it is optimized like that. So it's written to make this kind of nesting. And basically, you can have different widget for alignment. You have the line, you have the container that can have an alignment, or the positioned. It depends on the widget you want to create. Even the spacing are widget. Basically, the padding are another widget that you can use to wrap your own widget. You can wrap your widget with your text widget with a padding in order to have the padding around the text. So let's see how you can compose the layout. Basically, this is our target screen. We have a screen, a classical screen with a title bar, with a list of items, and a button on the right bottom. How do you do that in Android? First of all, coordinator layout. I speak about the coordinator layout before that. Is the most used view group at the moment, and it uses the constraint to organize its child. It can be used to define relationship. As I said, I want to have the image on the left of the two text, or we can do by using a linear layout. But the coordinator is at the moment the most used one. To define a coordinator, this is the XML tag that you see. One thing that I don't like of the Android XML is that many layout are not directly included in the base library. So where do you see Android X constraint layout .widget .constraint layout? Basically, is the full part of the package, because it was added later with the Android X library, and then you have to have this long name every time you need a constraint layout in your UI. This is mitigated by the fact that you rarely see the XML directly because you're working mostly on the layout builder, but this is a thing that I don't really like. Then we have our app bar and toolbar. Basically, what we see on the top is the toolbar. The app bar is a wrapper that is used to have a different integration with some kind of layout. For example, if we have the app bar layout inside of a coordinator layout, we can have some effect like the toolbar that disappear when you scroll, or we can have collapsible toolbar instead of the toolbar inside the app bar layout. But as you can see, we have to define a lot of parameters just to understand where we want the app bar layout and how it should appear. The layout constraint top to top off is one of that constraint that we speaking before of the constraint layout. Because if we have the app bar inside a constraint layout, it will be in a random place, basically, if we just put it inside the layout. So we have to define a constraint. This constraint is saying to the parent constraint layout, I want this app bar starting to the top of the parent from the top of this layout. Then we have the defining theme, then the sides. In this case, the width is the match parent. It means that it should get as big as the parent, and the height is a wrap content. And the toolbar. The toolbar is effectively what you see, so the purple row with the button, with the text and the icons. This is not what you see directly here because I didn't have defined any of this, but just a title, my layout. This is the one you saw on the previous screen. So we have the constraint, and then we have all the layout parameters. Another thing that I don't like so much is that if you have a toolbar, we need to define a lot of things just to be on the right sides on the right place. For example, if we defined a theme, we still have to give the color to the toolbar. We still have to define the pop-up theme. The pop-up theme is the one you see when you open the more button, for example. We have to define the title. That's okay. In this case, it's not the best practice. I directly hard-coded the name in the toolbar. You should use another file that it's called string XML file to help internationalization. And you should define the height of your action bar. Where you see this question mark before the parameters, it basically is because we are getting the default size for our project. And then we have the action button, the floating action button. The floating action button is an interactive button that the user can click to do something, and it uses the elevation to stay above the rest of the items. Of course, this depends on where do you put that. Since we are in a constraint layout, we can use the constraint to define its position. In this case, bottom of parent and right of parent. Also, we need to define the distance that we want from the bottom right to the from the bottom right to the page. Otherwise, the button will be crammed on the bottom right. And we have to define the size. A simple wrap content will work for a floating action button. And that's all. The icon, you see here the wrong icon because I used another sample. The button you see on the XML is again the one you saw on the previous sample. And in Flutter, where is my constraint layout? Instead of the constraint layout in Flutter, to do a basic screen, we use a scaffold. As you can see, as a difference between the sample on Android, I basically put the whole screen here. Why? Because if you look at the code under the scaffold, basically everything is already there. So we don't have to define a lot of things that are already defined, for example, by the theme. The color of the button, the color of the toolbar, the color of the height of the items. So everything that is defined for the theme is basically already used as default. This is our scaffold. The scaffold has different parameters. It can have an up bar, a body, and a floating action button. It can have also a bottom bar, a snack bar. It can have a lot of different parameters. You can go to the documentation of the Flutter scaffold and explore that. The important part is that since those are adhering to the material theme, you don't need to say, I want this button to be on the bottom right to the page with this spacing, and I don't want the up bar on the top with these sides and this color, because we are adhering to the material design, so everything is already predefined. If we want to differ, we can. But basically, if we want to stay with material design, this is everything we need to do. And this is because the scaffold have parameters for each one of these widgets. The parameter app bar define our app bar. App bar is another widget. Also, the app bar of Flutter can include the title, can include an action or more action, it can include the hamburger icon. In this case, I used only the layout as I did in the Flutter example, in the Android example. Everything else, as I said, is already defined by the team. So what we add with a lot of code, even if in XML, I have only one row. And as you can see, here the title is a simple text widget, but we don't have the separation of the logic and the code. Because as you can see on the floating action button, our action is directly managed in the widget. I didn't even show the how do you do that in Android because I had to show the Java or Kotlin file where you use the button, and it's a lot of more code to pick up the file, pick up the correct UI, and assign on-click listener to handle that. In this case, directly, when you define your floating action button, you define also the preset. You define the icon as a child, and that's all. Basically, our structure is just these 10 lines of code. Now let's talk about the alternatives. For example, let's talk about this screen. Talking about this screen, we said a lot of things. We said we have an app bar, we have a floating action button, we have the list itself. How can we use the list? In Android, we have the recycler view. The recycler view is a powerful widget that lets you use the recycler system basically to have a list of UI that you can fill with your data, and whenever an item go out of the screen, it gets recycled, and basically the memory is optimized to not construct all the list at the same time. In Flutter, you do the same with the list view. But again, the list view is another widget. You don't have any kind of separation between the logic and the UI. So you use the constructor of the list view builder. It have several constructors because you can define one with separator, you can define one with a fixed list of widget. The only thing that you need is the item count. In this case, we are looking at a simple to array. So the count is the same length of the array. An item builder. The item builder is the basically where you construct the layout, the inner layout, the row layout. For example, in this case, we have a container 850 dependent the independence density independent pixel with a text, and the text is basically entry and the name of the entry taken directly from the array on the top. The item builder is a callback. It means that you have a parameter, context, and index as input, and it should return something. In this case, a widget. As I said, you can compose your widget. So if I wanted, I may use my old widget, the raw widget that I showed you before, and for each index, I will have my widget shown. Instead of using the same logic of the recycler view, where you have to calculate the difference and see you need to tell the recycler view in the adapter which position correspond at which item, and having a different view holder and different file XML for each of your layout. In Flutter, it doesn't matter because you need just to return a widget. So I can have if index equals 3, return a completely different widget. It doesn't matter. It's really this easy. And then the most used layout, the most used view group of Android after the coordinator layout, the linear layout. Linear layout is a basic view group that let you put the inner view one after the others. Basically, it means that if we have a list of items, for example, you can see the text on the image, you will have a vertical linear layout where you put the item one after the other. In Flutter, the linear layout as is doesn't exist, but we have the column and the row. The column is the equivalent of the linear layout vertical. Basically, you have a column, you can define the cross-axis alignment, that is basically where the item should start on the horizontal sides. The main axis sides, in this case mean, it means the column should be bigger than the space occupied by the child. If I say max, the column will be the space of the parent. And then we have an array of widgets, the children. In this example, we have only text with different styles, but again, I can have whatever I want. Instead of a text, I can have a row, I can have an up bar, I can have a floating action button, whatever I want. Because I just need a widget inside. And the row. The row is the equivalent of the linear layout horizontal. Basically, its children one by other, left to right or right to left, because we can also invert the spacing. So, but now someone may ask, and the layout weight, how we can do that? The layout weight is made with the expanded. You can also add a flex parameter. That means it's basically our weight. When I don't define it, is because the default is 1. So if I wanted the center item craft beautiful UIs to be double the size of the other two, I just can use the flex 2 on the center expanded. For the frame layout, we have the stack. Basically, it's the same. You put the widget one by another. The widget on the top are the most background one, and then the other are stacked one on top of the other. In this case, you can see the 3 different colored square. The red is the bigger one, but is on the bottom, then the green, then the blue. If you want, you can go to gallery.flutter.dev, and you will see the huge catalog of widgets that you can use, because this was only a smaller equivalent of what we can do between Android and iOS, Flutter, sorry. So, thanks, and wait. Where is my constraint layout? It doesn't exist. I lied to you, the constraint layout in Flutter doesn't exist, but you have plenty of way to do your layout, because as I said, you can control pixel by pixel. It's just a matter of composing. Go to gallery.flutter.dev and you will see all the widgets you have at disposal. So I want to say thank you to our audience. And if you want to make any question, I'm here available to answer. You can look for me on Twitter. And if you want to follow the community, you can go to the link you see on this slide. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Carlo, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Amazing. And we have a bunch of questions for you. Gonna switch the stream. Here we go. So the first one is, what's the best way to find out which widget Dart code corresponds to a specific part of the current screen of the app?
This is a great question because since we don't have a visual hint of what we are seeing in our code, we don't really know what is what if we are not aware of that. But there is a great way to discover it. Basically, this is really interesting because when you are using the debug version of the application, you can use the DevTools, like the DevTools you have on web, for example, or you have Dart DevTools even for Android Studio or Visual Studio Code. And basically, you just tap on the widget you want to inspect, and you will get to the corresponding part of the code. So it's basically a no-brainer. You click and you see where you are.
Yeah, and it is amazing that that tool I use a lot.
Yes, also because using the power of the auto reload, when you know where is the widget that you are looking at, you can change the parameter live, and you will see the change live without reloading the application and without losing the state. So if you did some computation and then you want to say, what if this text is red? How many times when you are showing the designer the work, he say, yes, but you can move that a little to the left. In Flutter you can, while you are already debugging something else.
Yes. All right, another question. How can I manage different languages?
The different language, it was for a long time a difficult part of the Flutter environment, because basically if the Flutter team said, do what you want, you had several libraries, but it relied on a lot of code building by your hand, so it wasn't really immediate to use. But since a couple of years, I think, at least one for sure, there is a plugin called ENTL for Android Studio and Visual Studio Code. Basically, you just define, use the plugin, you just define a JSON with your translation, basically key and translation like you do in the XML, string XML file. And you use the plugin will build all the necessary code you need to use that translation. Basically, you just use it in the context, pick the instance of the internationalization library, and write the name of the key. Basically, it's like s dot of context and key, and that's all.
Okay, cool. And we have another question. Have you seen any similarity in the creation of the Flutter UI versus the Jetpack Compose?
I have to be honest, I didn't check it Jetpack Compose a lot, because since 2 years I'm full-time in Flutter, and I didn't update it a lot in Android. I saw that they manage the thing in a similar way. Basically, when composing, you have the I don't even know how it's called. Basically, you have the widget, and you have a similar system to define a text, center, and so on. But I have to be honest, I didn't check it out.
Okay.
Just a question directly with the last one.
There is another question. Sorry.
Go.
Sorry?
Go, Omar.
About the Jetpack Compose, do you think that learning the Flutter UI makes like easier on learning Jetpack Compose or not?
I can't. Sorry, Omar, but I can't hear you. Okay. Well, we wait. There are other questions.
Yes.
I think Omar is writing in YouTube.
For what about the other question, I can answer a bit. I've done both Flutter and Jetpack Compose, and first I've done Flutter, then Jetpack Compose, and I found myself not at home, but the switch was easy for me. Lot of things are similar, and once you have learned the concept of declarative, you can switch between the different platforms without any kind of issue.
Oh, I can say that you can switch without any kind of issue, even if you don't use the Jetpack Compose.
Yeah, of course.
I did that.
Yeah. So Omar wrote the question because
it was that one, so it's okay.
I answered that, but
yes, basically, yes, the answer was provided by Marco, that co-authored this talk. Thank you, Marco, for helping me.
Okay, we have another question, and all the examples you showed us are supported also on web.
Yes, of course they are, and I wanted to show you even a sample, but my connection doesn't work well with StreamYard and for doing other things. Basically, you can go on dartpad.com and you can just try if you tap on samples on the right and then on one of the Flutter samples, you can directly write the code here, but at the moment it worked. Basically, you will see directly what I said. And for example, it even works with the hot reload. So the app is running, we can push the button and see what I done. And if I change the text we are looking here, you can change the text directly without having to resort to... No, I think that here the hot reload doesn't work. I said something stupid, sorry. So in the Dartpad doesn't work, but if you are running an application, yes. And you can see all the widget in web running inside of a Dartpad. So if you can do this in Dartpad, of course you can do that on a web page.
Okay, we don't have at the moment other questions, so you are in time if you have any other question to just write on Slido on the YouTube chat. In the meantime, I want to thank you, Carlo, again for the talk, and we are happy to host you.
And I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting.
And until we wait, if there are any other questions, I want to say that if you want, at the end of this session, there will be an Hangout, a Google Meet, where we can try to replace the usual beer and pizza that we used to have on real events. We don't have beer and pizza, unfortunately, but we can maybe talk about and share our ideas, and we hope to get back soon in life.
Well, if you told this to me before, I just have bought with me something to drink.
If you want, you have time to to go and grab one. So this is the link. I just showing it on site. If you want to join, I leave it also on the YouTube chat as well. So here is the link.
Anyway, if you have any late question, you can reach me on Twitter, and I am happy to answer your question.
Yes, of course. And just another notice. We will share a document with all the links, the useful links, the Carlo slides, and all the useful things to remember from this talk later tomorrow or in the next few days. So make sure to follow us on the social and to subscribe on our YouTube channel. So I think that's it for tonight. If you want, Andrea, to add something.
Yeah, and just thanks, Carlo, for your time. It was an amazing session. I hope we can have you again. We can host you again in another talk. I don't know if in English or in Italian. We will decide.
Don't ask me another language because I can speak only Italian and English. So if you want to beta test another language, don't ask me.
Okay, sure. So thank you very much. Thank everyone, and see you at the Hangout.
And
See you
good
later.
night.